Thank you, friends. Well, it will be the first trip of his second term. President Trump about to depart for Asheville, North Carolina. He will tour the damage from Hurricane Helene, and then he's going to head to Los Angeles, where he will view the utter devastation from the outbreak of wildfires. Good morning. I'm Dana Perino.
And good morning, Dana. I'm Brett Baer, in for Bill Hemmer. This is America's Newsroom. Today, he will be consoler-in-chief, but yesterday, he put the world on notice. President Trump delivering a virtual address to the World Economic Forum in Davos. His top-line message, make your products in America or get hammered with tariffs. The president also sending a message to U.S. adversaries, China and Russia. Here's what he told Sean Hannity.
You had a conversation with President Xi. We have problems with them. They have territorial ambitions with Taiwan, intellectual property theft, their unfair trade practices. How'd that conversation go?
It went fine. It was a good, friendly conversation. I had a great relationship with him prior to COVID. I had a very good relationship with him. We had a very good relationship. I had a very good relationship with Putin also.
Have you spoken to him?
I don't want to say.
Madeline Rivera has much more from Washington. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, good morning, Dana and Brett. President Trump is making it clear he intends to stick to and carry out his America First policies, and world leaders are scrambling over how to respond. The topic of tariffs, for instance, has dominated the conversations in Davos, where several world leaders are hoping for a measured approach. Trump is critical of what he calls an unfair trade relationship with the European Union, and he wants NATO members to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, which would in turn require the U.S. to spend more than $1 trillion a year on defense spending. Regarding conflict, Trump is urging Russian President Vladimir Putin to strike a deal with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to end the war in Ukraine.
Zelensky, I will say this, he wants to settle now. He's had enough. He shouldn't have allowed this to happen either.
No.
You know, if he's no angel, he shouldn't have allowed this war to happen.
Trump is hoping China can exert its influence over Russia to help stop the fighting. Some Democrats say Trump does have a window of opportunity, but it requires a balancing act.
There is a window here for President Trump to make a real difference for the West, for Ukraine, and for the world. But the way for him to do that is to communicate with Putin his intention to continue robust and unrelenting support for Ukraine on the battlefield.
Looking over to the Middle East, the White House says Saudi's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is looking to invest more than $600 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. Trump wants to push that figure to around $1 trillion. He also wants Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the price of oil. He told reporters earlier this week Saudi Arabia could be his first foreign trip if they cough up the money. Brett and Dana, back to you.
All right, Madeline Rivera, thank you so much. And we'll have much more on this with Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. That's President Trump's special envoy to Russia and Ukraine, and we will talk to him just a few minutes from now.
Well, President Trump's pick for defense secretary will know his fate by the end of today. Pete Hegseth's nomination clearing a key Senate hurdle, and that tees up a final confirmation vote that could put him in charge of the Pentagon. Aisha Hasni has the latest on this from Capitol Hill. Morning, Aisha.
Right. Good morning to you. So if Senate Democrats and Republicans do not come to a time agreement today, then we're looking at potentially a 9 p.m. vote on Pete Hegseth's final confirmation. And we are expecting 2 GOP senators to vote no on him. And that's because of the vote that we saw yesterday, that cloture vote, where GOP senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins voted no. Collins is citing lack of experience on this, and Murkowski citing lack of experience and also those past allegations. Now, with just 2 senators out, Hegseth is expected to get the 51 Republican votes that he needs. That's without Vice President J.D. Vance. Yesterday, the Senate finally confirmed John Ratcliffe as President Trump's CIA director, 74-25, a pretty hefty bipartisan vote there. He was sworn in shortly after. So you might be wondering why things are moving so slow. Well, Democrats are forcing Republicans to sit through this 30 hours of debate for each nominee. Republicans say there's really no debating going on the Senate floor, just Democrats wasting time. At this rate, Kristi Noem won't be taken up until probably Sunday. President Trump has brought up using recess appointments, but hasn't pulled the trigger yet.
I'd be willing to use recess appointments. It's up to John, and we'll see. And John Thune's a great guy, great senator, and knows his stuff inside out and backwards, but I would use recess appointments if he wants to do that. Absolutely. The Democrats are just delaying. They always delay.
Brett, more hearings have been put on the Senate schedule for some of these more controversial nominees. RFK Jr. will happen on Wednesday, and then Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel on Thursday. It's a busy time in the Senate. Brett?
Yeah, it'll be busy. Aisha Hasni live on the Hill. Aisha, thanks. Dan?
Want to bring in Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno. I guess you'll be working through the weekend, but probably happy to do so to get these things done. In the meantime, President Trump has pushed forward very quickly on the immigration crackdown. By the numbers, this is call for number 2 here. By Thursday, there were 373 criminal arrests, 165 non-criminal arrests. We had 16 gang members picked up and 1,000 removals or repatriations. Donald Trump told Sean Hannity this just the other night.
You look at people pouring into this country and and they're being reported where you're seeing major terrorists, are now in our country, and they knew that this was happening and they did nothing about it. They had an open borders policy. When you have a country that's taking gang members off the street and dropping them into our country, nothing good is going to happen.
And Senator, just to put up for everybody on the screen to see this, Caroline Leavitt, the president's press secretary, posted this photograph on X saying that the deportation flights have begun. Your reaction on the immigration push right out of the gate?
Well, it should never have happened in the first place. As President Trump said, it's absolutely ridiculous that these people were allowed into our country. We're going to get them all out of here and restore safety and security to our cities. That's what the voters expressed on November 5th, and that's what we're going to get done.
Senator Moreno, good to see you. You're now the senior senator from Ohio. And I wanted to ask you about the pushback that you're seeing from some officials, state and local officials, who say, listen, we're going to fight this federal action. The Chicago mayor is one of them. Take a listen.
We are a welcoming city, and we are a sanctuary city. That has not changed because of who won the election. Any of the measures that the president is looking to execute against working people in the city of Chicago, we will defend our city. It's just that simple.
Sounds like a policy car crash about ready to happen.
Yeah, I think he's looking to get the prize as the stupidest, most ineffective mayor in American history. He's there already. He's just going for extra credit. Look, at the end of the day, he has so many problems in this city, American citizens that live under terrible conditions. He should be advocating for them and not illegal criminals. But again, this guy's completely out of his mind. Hopefully the voters of Chicago get rid of him.
I wanted to ask you about you getting ready to push right out of the gate as well. You've introduced a bill that focuses on asylum and the reforms needed there. We'll put it up on the screen for people to see, requiring asylum seekers to file application at legal ports of entry, refusing access to those who cross illegally, amongst other things. Tell me a little bit about your options here to try to get this done.
Well, as you know, we have a country that welcomes almost 1 million people, like myself and my family, to this country. And what asylum does, it allows people to skip the line. So people who claim asylum when it's absolutely not true, they're not fleeing persecution because of nationality or race. They're just trying to get a shortcut into this country. We got to stop that and have a legal immigration system that honors people who actually follow the legal process. So this is truly common sense, and I'm hoping that we get a lot of Democrat support on this bill.
Senator, how fast do you think this immigration deportation is going to happen? If you were to project out forward, obviously Dana talked about the numbers just Thursday. Where do you think this goes?
I think we're going to get to probably a goal of 1 million people by the end of this year, which is critically essential. We have that many already that have deportation orders on top of criminals that we don't know where they are. And I think that's going to have an effect to block people from wanting to come to this country. Look, we got to get this under control. The citizens of America deserve a sovereign country, a secure country, and that's what we're going to give them.
Let me ask you a little bit about the fact that you're having to work through the weekend. Chuck Schumer basically said they're going to slow walk it, and John Thune said we could do this the hard way or the easy way. Ultimately, it does seem that everyone will get confirmed, at least the ones who have passed through committee so far.
Yeah, look, I came from the private sector where working 90, 100 hours a week was normal. So to Chuck Schumer, bring it on. If you want to have all of your colleagues spend the weekend here, let's go. There's plenty of things to do in Washington, D.C. We'll work through the night. We're going to work 24/7 if we need to. President Trump deserves his cabinet, and it's up to us to make sure he gets it as soon as possible. It's a national security imperative. The fact that Kristi Noem's still not in the job is terrible. The fact that Pete Hegseth is still not in the job is terrible. We're going to get it done. I think all of the Republicans are united in that idea. And let's work through the weekend, Chuck.
All right, Senator. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Brett, President Trump departing any moment to view the storm damage in North Carolina. He is also accusing FEMA of failing the victims. A former FEMA administrator is here to react. Plus this.
She's that American girl that would serve you a coffee with a smile and help you get a good day started. She was doing amazing at school, and her only mistake was to go to bed that night.
Accused murderer Brian Kohberger will be back in court today for a second pretrial hearing, the latest on his team's efforts to throw out nearly all the evidence against him. Plus, why President Trump is going after wind energy despite declaring a national emergency on energy in the United States.
The wind blows and then it doesn't blow and the things cost a fortune. They're made in China and they kill the birds and they're horrible. We don't want windmills.
Welcome back. Checking the fires out west. Crews making progress on the Hughes fire scorching northern Los Angeles County. The fire erupting Wednesday, rapidly consuming over 10,000 acres. Evacuation orders for thousands of people were lifted or downgraded yesterday. Right now, we're told it's 36% contained, but the danger is not over yet. Firefighters are battling multiple fires throughout Southern California, including one near the U.S.-Mexico border.
It feels like we're finally being heard for the first time in 4 months. Trump is coming here, making it his first stop, that he cares and that change is going to happen.
President Trump making his first trip of his term by visiting disaster zones, a first stop North Carolina to view hurricane recovery efforts and the slow pace of them, frankly, and then to California to survey wildfire damage. Trump is criticizing FEMA's response to the disasters under Biden. Now he warns the agency is set to face a reckoning. Jackie Heinrich is live from Asheville, North Carolina with a preview of the president's visit. Hi, Jackie.
Good morning, Dana. Yeah, this community is still picking up the pieces as the president comes to visit. Businesses all over are in ruins. There's still rubble everywhere. I'll have my camera pan off so you can take a look in real time. More than 1 million cubic yards of debris have already been collected, but officials haven't touched the waterways yet. I was told this morning by one person involved in the cleanup there's 2 million cubic yards of vegetation sitting in just one area of a nearby river, which is a big site for tourism like fishing and tubing. Victims this month also got sudden notices that their hotel vouchers were expiring. And people on the ground here say FEMA is not approving requests fast enough.
I'm stopping in North Carolina, first stop, because those people were treated very badly by Democrats. And I'm stopping there. We're going to get that thing straightened out because they're still suffering from a hurricane from months ago.
The president said this week he wants to overhaul FEMA. According to his former FEMA administrator, the system's been bogged down with bureaucracy. Quote, nearly 90 different recovery programs span 30 federal agencies, creating delays and confusion at the very moments when survivors and communities need swift, clear support. Small incremental policy changes are no longer enough. We need reforms that accelerate recovery, eliminate roadblocks, and equip communities to prepare more effectively for what lies ahead. Now, conditioning aid on preparedness or shifting more of the burden to states are two proposals currently in Congress, especially after the California fires. Trump threatened to withhold help for the state if Governor Gavin Newsom doesn't amend the water management policy, which prioritizes wildlife conservation. Newsom said he'll be greeting Trump today on the tarmac when he heads there after North Carolina.
A lot of relationships in the Trump world, a lot of relationships of trust. I communicate with a lot of folks around him. Folks that have his ear and influence. I don't want. This is a sideshow, a lot of this stuff, but I know it's the show that will probably be the focus of a little bit too much tomorrow. When all I care about is what we can do together.
Now, the aid debate could be a test for Trump's DHS pick. Kristi Noem. She was asked in her confirmation hearing this week by some Democrats if she would politicize requests for aid if she got such an order from Trump. So much more debate ahead on this. Back to you.
I'm glad you're there for us today, Jackie. Thank you. Brett?
Dana, the aforementioned former FEMA administrator Brock Long joins us now. Brock, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hey, good morning.
I want to play a little bit more of President Trump's interview with Sean Hannity, specifically on FEMA funding. Take a listen.
The Democrats don't care about North Carolina. What they've done with FEMA is so bad. FEMA is a whole other discussion because all it does is complicate everything. FEMA has not done their job for the last 4 years. I'd rather see the states take care of their own problems.
So what about that suggestion? I know you're thinking about a proposal to possibly restructure the way FEMA works.
Yeah, Brett, listen, I think, unfortunately, FEMA is immersed in a terrible bureaucratic process. Responsive recovery has become way too complex, as you were alluding to. There's 90 different recovery programs that local governments have to navigate their way through. They don't understand what they're entitled to, how to sequence that funding together, and use it in a manner to properly respond, recover, and rebuild. And I think what I would suggest to the president is put together a presidential commission to not only holistically reform FEMA, but the entire profession of emergency management. You know, the profession has been piecemealed together over the last decades by bad legislation. Last year, there were 12 bills in the last congressional session to, quote, revise FEMA. That's concerning because that's like strapping new shiny parts to a rusty old bicycle when we actually need one bill to reform and rebuild that frame to make it less bureaucratic, empower the governors, as the president says. I totally agree with that. You know, and make FEMA a supplement to help state and local governments overcome any capacity gaps that they experienced during the disaster. FEMA should not be 911. It was never designed to be 911, but the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act made it so, and it's never recovered. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a very difficult disaster.
You know, he's going to visit, the president is, North Carolina, which is still feeling the brunt of Hurricane Helene, and California. If you look at the FEMA funding just over the past 4 years, this is X2, you go from $26.4 billion in 2021 to $33 billion, and yet Congress is going to have to replenish this fund pretty quickly because of all of these disasters.
Right, and you know, we have to understand how to break this negative response cycle. When I was in office over 2 years, I had to ask Congress 3 times for more funding into the Disaster Relief Fund, which they granted. But before we keep asking for more money, we've got to fix the system holistically again, right? And so I think a lot of work has got to be done. We've got to stop pointing the finger at FEMA or the insurance companies for moving out. We have to bring, you know, the critical infrastructure owners in the private sector together with Congress, together with the president's administration and the experts to sit down and design a system and a way forward that can be phased in over time. The other thing that we have to do is incentivize communities for doing the right thing. The communities that are implementing proper land use planning, implementing building codes, properly ensuring their infrastructure should be rewarded. Not only, you know, in the disaster declaration process, but how do we give those communities more access to education funds, transportation funds, you know, commerce grants, whatever it may be. So we have to you know, really rethink the way that we're going to be resilient.
Brock, last thing quickly. The LA Times has an investigation speaking about trying to fix things on the front end. It says this: officials were warned of failing water systems before the Palisades fire, and the fixes never happened. Records show LA County missed dozens of opportunities for water infrastructure improvements that experts say likely would have helped firefighters during the Palisades fire. I mean, there's a lot of reckoning to be done out in LA area.
Yeah, Brett, you know, here's the thing. Whether it's Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, the LA County, you know, wildfires that are taking place, what needs to be done is an exhaustive after-action report to fully understand what led to this catastrophic disaster. And, you know, whether it's water reservoirs that were not, you know, filled up to be ready to fight the fire, or maybe it wasn't proper mitigation, whatever it may be. You know, we have to uncover those things, but also solve them so that they don't continue to be in this repeat cycle over and over and over again. And one of the things that we have to do is completely overhaul the public awareness campaigns. The things we've been asking citizens to do over the last 10 or 20 years are obviously not working if the impact is getting worse. And so, again, I hope the president will put together a commission to redesign the system.
Brock Long, former FEMA administrator. Brock, thanks so much for the time. Dana?
Thank you, Brett.
And President Trump handing the job of ending the war in Ukraine to retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, the highly decorated three-star general, on the challenges he faced.
Leaving the White House for his trip to North Carolina and Los Angeles, talking about the fire devastation, also talking about his nominee for Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, talking to reporters on the way to Marine One. Let's take a listen.
Everybody, thank you very much. Thank you. North Carolina, it's been a horrible thing, the way that's been allowed to fester, and we're going to get it fixed up. It should have been done months ago from the hurricane that took place almost 4 months ago. North Carolina's been treated very badly, so we're stopping there, and we're going to then go to Los Angeles and take a look at a fire that could have been put out if they let the water flow, but they didn't let the water flow. And they still haven't for whatever reason. So I think we're going to have a very interesting time. I think many of you are going with us. If you'd like to have a ride on the plane, we'd love to give it to you. I don't know. Is he going? Is he going? I don't know. I mean, I really don't. You know, because if he's going to be there, it would be cheaper, but I didn't invite him. Somebody did. Look, whatever it is, he's a good man. I don't know what's going to happen. You never know in those things, but Pete's a very, very good man. I hope he makes it. I hope he makes it. I was very surprised that Collins and Murkowski would do that. And of course, Mitch is always a no vote, I guess. That's Mitch a no vote? How about Mitch? Huh? He what? Let's see what happens. I did a big push for the March for Life, and we look forward to seeing it. I'm going to be watching it, and J.D. Vance, our vice president, is there, and he's going to be representing us very well, taking place in a little while. And other than being a little bit cold, it's a beautiful day. How will your administration protect pro-life Americans?
We're all for it. In fact, as you know, I just signed a pardon, and in the pardon we released 23 people that were unjustly put in having to do with pro-life, and they will be released, and they'll be out very shortly. It was disgraceful what happened. That was a persecution.
Will you give Italy a break on terrorists?
Well, I like her very much. Let's see what happens. Have a good time. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump there. You can see it's a little cold in D.C. as they head to Marine One on the way to North Carolina and Los Angeles. And Dana talking about what he's facing, what he's going to see on this trip, as well as the chances for Pete Hegseth to get confirmed, asking the reporters what's the deal with Mitch, meaning Mitch McConnell, whether he is a yes or no vote. It seems like he has the votes. Hegseth does, but we'll see by the time tonight comes around. And interesting to see that the First Lady is deciding to go on this, and I think that's important, especially for those victims of the hurricanes and the fires. To have her presence is going to mean a lot. Also, just from a communication standpoint, I would say I would get very frustrated when Joe Biden would try to have an availability with the press while the helicopter's spinning, because you couldn't hear him. You couldn't understand him. Trump's voice carries, and you could see Brett used to be one of those guys. There is a hunger amongst the press to ask a lot of questions, and he's willing to answer them. So we are. And think about, Dana, how many questions have been asked and answered over the last 3 days? There's been more questions asked and answered, as you look at Air Force One here, than we saw from President Biden probably in months. I think that if you added it up, for sure, you would get to that number. So the president's going to head to North Carolina. We will bring that to you live as he gets a briefing there when he gets to Asheville, North Carolina. And now this, watch.
Zelensky, I will say this, he wants to settle now. He's had enough. He shouldn't have allowed this to happen either.
No.
You know, if he's no angel, he shouldn't have allowed this war to happen. Putin shouldn't have done it too. I mean, I'm not blaming only one. Putin shouldn't have done it. He shouldn't have done it, and it has to stop.
President Trump pushing for an end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He has given my next guest 100 days to help broker a deal. And here to talk about it is retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, Special Envoy to Russia and Ukraine. You did have some back and forth a little bit between Putin's people, Zelensky, Trump, all trying to figure out, like, could this actually come to an end? You're at the helm. How do you rate the chances?
Hi, Dana. Thanks for having me. I think it's going to come to an end, and I think President Trump's the only guy who can do it. You know, I talked to him earlier this morning, very early, and we talked a little bit about the strategy going forward and how that's going to play out. But he's absolutely right. He's talking about stopping the killing and stopping the carnage. Look, just as a couple of examples, you look at the major cities like Mariupol, which is totally destroyed, a city of 500,000. Think of a city like Denver or Atlanta proper. That's like 500,000, totally destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides. You know, just Ukraine alone, they've lost more soldiers in 3 years than we lost in the entire Vietnam War and Korean War combined. So he understands the carnage and the destruction. And last September, when they were at Trump Tower with Zelensky, he said it's time, and it is time to end it. And I think he can do it when he gets the dialogue going. And I think but the most important thing I think everybody needs to understand, Dana, it's not going to end kinetically. What I mean by that, it's not going to end by killing each other. This is going to end, and he said this yesterday when he was at Davos, when he made the comment to the people there, that the key role of not only diplomacy, but economics as well. Let me just use one example, oil. You know, the price of oil right now is probably, when you look at Brent or WTI, the baseline pricing, it's about $78 a barrel. So Russia's getting billions of dollars of money from oil sales. What if you drop that to $45 a barrel, which is basically the baseline break-even point? That's what he made the comment yesterday when he was speaking to the people in Davos. And this is where the president comes from. He comes from it economically, and he comes from it diplomatically, talking to the North Koreans or talking to the Chinese. And that's how we're going to finish this thing off. It's not going to be done by killing each other. That's not going to work.
I want to play one thing from President Trump about that meeting with Zelensky and what Zelensky told him. Watch here.
Did President Zelensky tell you that personally?
Yeah, sure. He's ready to negotiate a deal. He'd like to stop. He's somebody that lost a lot of soldiers.
So Zelensky cares about that. Does Putin care enough to come to the table?
Well, when he was talking about soldiers, I don't think the Russians do, because that's how the Russians fight. They fight an attrition fight. Look, this is a nation that was willing to lose 700,000 killed in 6 months at Stalingrad in World War II, and they just throw troops at it. So the president comes at it differently. He understands the killing. The killing has to stop, but he approaches warfare differently, and he looks at economics as a piece of that warfare. So when you look at Putin, you can't just say, well, stop the killing, because candidly, that's not their mentality. That's not how the president fits into that. You know, unlike Biden, who made the comment, you know, as long as it takes as much as it takes, that was a kinetic fight. We're going to give them all this military equipment and keep killing them. Well, I mean, that's an important piece of it. But there's other pieces that are just as important. And I think the president understands that. And I think he's going to drive to that point. And I have great confidence that he can actually bring this to a conclusion.
May I ask you one last question? Mark Thiessen, Fox News contributor and Washington Post columnist, joined up with General Jack Keane, who I know you know very well. And they have a piece today that says America must continue to arm Ukraine without U.S. taxpayer dollars. One of the suggestions would be to let Ukraine use frozen Russian assets to buy U.S. weapons. Is that on the table?
Well, that's a discussion piece. That's always part of it, because you have all these options and you want to present the President of the United States with multitudes of options so he can pick which one he wants to go with. But I think we've always talked about it. We've talked about this repeatedly, of using Russian frozen assets to do that, to buy U.S. arms. I mean, that is one piece of the puzzle that needs to be discussed, and it's going to be on the table with the President to talk about, but it's not the piece that is going to solve this. But it's an interesting point, and it's worth discussing, Dana.
I'm sure that you're not short of people recommending their own ideas, and I'm sure you have your own. Please come back and visit us. We appreciate you having time for us this morning.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, General. Brett?
President Trump lashing out at big banks over their treatment of conservatives. Are they putting political bias before the bottom line? Katie Pavlich on that next. Plus, President Trump taking aim at all wind projects in the U.S. Will this help or hurt our quest for energy independence?
This was a bad deal. It was a bad deal for America. It was a bad deal for our coast. It was a bad.
Name the next 4 hostages who will be released tomorrow as part of a ceasefire deal with Israel. The first 3 captives were freed last week, and senior correspondent Mike Tobin has more. He is live from Tel Aviv. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Dana. The second wave of hostage releases is expected to execute tomorrow. Therefore, at any time now, we're expecting Hamas to release the identities of who will be released. But 4 female hostages are expected to be released, and that includes Israeli soldiers. Therefore, through a process of elimination, we've got a pretty good idea of who to look for tomorrow. Names like Arbel Yahud. She's a female civilian hostage. She is believed to be alive, so she is expected to be among those liberated tomorrow. The complicating factor with her is that she is held by Islamic Jihad and not Hamas. 5 hostages were female soldiers who worked as spotters at the Nachal Oz base. 3 of them get out tomorrow. That means Nama Levy stands a good chance at freedom. She's a soldier who became one of the many horrifying images from October 7th as she was captured on video in blood-soaked gray sweatpants as she was manhandled into a 4x4 in Gaza City. Hamas is also supposed to reveal today which hostages are alive and who is dead. The hostage releases are coupled with the release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. Around 180 Palestinians should be released. That includes people involved in the 2003 bombing of the Maxim restaurant in Haifa that killed 21 people back in 2003. Another deadline that we're keeping an eye on from another ceasefire agreement, this one with Hezbollah, is not going to be met, and that is the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the south of Lebanon as part of that ceasefire agreement. Israel says that the Lebanese armed forces haven't done their part to secure the south of Lebanon and prevent Hezbollah from refortifying and rearming in the south of Lebanon. Therefore, the Prime Minister's office says the withdrawal from the south of Lebanon will be gradual in conjunction with the United States, but they're not going to hit that deadline. Dana?
Mike, we'll be watching very carefully, and thank you for being there for us. Brett?
You got it.
President Trump accusing 2 of the biggest American banks of discriminating against conservatives. Speaking over video to the World Economic Forum yesterday in Davos, Switzerland, the president calling out Bank of America and J.P. Morgan Chase specifically.
I hope you start opening your bank to conservatives, because many conservatives complain that the banks are not allowing them to do business within the bank, and that included a place called Bank of America. They don't take conservative business. And I don't know if the regulators mandated that because of Biden or what, but you and Jamie and everybody, I hope you're going to open your banks to conservatives, because what you're doing is wrong.
Joining us now, Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, editor of townhall.com. Good morning, Katie. These banks quickly put out statements after that whole Q&A and the statements. J.P. Morgan saying we have never and would never close an account for political reasons, full stop. Bank of America saying we are required to follow extensive government rules and regulations that sometimes result in decisions to exit client relationships. We never close accounts for political reasons and don't have a political litmus test. What about this part and what the president said there?
Well, the president did mention that maybe there was some pressure from the government on these banks to debank customers. And the fact is that conservatives and people in Silicon Valley trying to do crypto startups and new things that don't necessarily go with the leftist media and the leftist political ideology had been debanked. So there's no debate about the debanking. But Jamie Dimon recently did a podcast where he admits that, look, sometimes we have to debank people, but we're not allowed to say why, which creates all of the suspicion around the question of why this seems to go only in one way when it comes to who is losing their bank accounts. And we're not just talking, we're talking about high profile people and also everyday Americans. And when you look at the details of the Bank Secrecy Act, and the House Judiciary Committee and the Weaponization Committee have looked into this and released extensive reports, they're looking at flagging things like buying Christian Bibles, whether you worked or whether you purchased things at Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's in a certain time period. And you look at the details of newer regulations, as Mark Andreessen has, who is a crypto investor, and he says that the definition of a politically exposed person is subjective. So you're seeing a lot of these agencies in the administrative state and the federal government pressuring these banks to eliminate the bank accounts of people who they disagree with politically, and entire industries like the firearms industry, and as I mentioned, the crypto industry in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal writes it this way, targeting conservatives by federal regulators. When a government makes a suggestion, it's an order. As a result, banks may have felt compelled to close accounts without being able to inform customers of their reason for doing so, all the while the mainstream media obsessed about Mr. Trump's supposed danger to democracy. You know, by making this a public message to Davos, clearly it put it on the front page, and these banks responded. And it's interesting to see if that produces some kind of change.
Well, the banks claim that they want regulations to be changed because of the rules and regulations they have around being able to tell people why their accounts were closed, the pressure that comes with closing accounts. And there seems to be this subjective nature coming from the federal regulators where they will say, well, this category is something that we find risky, and therefore you need to go in and monitor your customers. And if someone is risky, in our opinion, because of what they believe in, not because they're breaking the law, you need to make sure that you debank them. Otherwise, we're going to subject you to hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. And so on the other side of that, you have a number of attorneys general writing letters to these big banks saying you need to change your terms of service and stand up to the feds when they try and violate the privacy of your customers. And you've seen a lot of this happening with the FBI as well, doing searches without a warrant illegally, hundreds of thousands of searches, and the banks have complied with a lot of this, citing these regulations because they don't want to pay the price if they're in violation of the law. So the issue, one of them out of many, is that the subjective nature of the product that these companies are selling and what their political affiliations are tend to go in one way. And so the conversation is open now in Washington as the president brought this to the global scale. But this has been an issue that's affected a lot of people for many, many years.
And obviously that entire speech to Davos made some headlines and shook things up. Katie, as always, thank you.
Yes.
Dana?
Good to see you.
Thank you, Brett. And President Trump embarking on the first trip of his second term, first touring a disaster zone in North Carolina.